Welcome back to the No Morning Show here on CTT. I am Natalie Lagore, and it's my pleasure to be with you here this morning as we celebrate the one-year anniversary of our first COVID-19 presser. Oh yes, who would have imagined a whole year later? And as God would have it, because it has to be God, we're also celebrating our first doses of vaccines from the COVAX facility. 30,000 plus a strong Trinidad and Tobago is through that COVAX facility. And I know a lot of you must be excited. Probably some of you not so much, because it would have been a good talking point if the government didn't get it on time. But we have Dr. Erica Wheeler, who is WHO PAHO representative to Trinidad and Tobago and the Dutch Kingdom Islands, here to talk to us about that, because I'm sure she would have played some part being a conduit between PAHO, WHO, and of course Trinidad and Tobago, the Ministry of Health. Good morning to you, Dr. Wheeler.
Good morning, Natalie.
And by the way, congratulations,
Thank
because
you
you
very
got
much.
us those vaccines.
Thank you.
And how do you feel, though, knowing that, oh my God, it made it on time?
Absolutely relieved.
I would imagine so.
Yes, because we said that our aim was to get the vaccines here before the end of March. So we skidded in before the end of March.
Oh,
so that was
yes.
great.
Yes,
was great.
I am happy for that skid. I'm telling you. Because, you know, you're right. There are a lot of people who are concerned that, you know, Trinidad and Tobago is lagging behind in terms of vaccinating people, whether it's, the, you know, the healthcare workers or those on the front line. But we've started with those 2,000 from Barbados, and now here we have 30,000. How many people will that vaccinate roughly?
Well, normally what we do is we advise, as WHO, advise the government to vaccinate half of the persons and keep the other half for the remaining period of time, because we have up to 12 weeks before the second dose can be given. So normally it's given, you know, the 2 doses up to 12 weeks apart. So half of it's 33,600 doses, half.
Will we be able to do that, though, considering that these vaccines, it's the AstraZeneca vaccine, and it has a shelf life of 6 months?
Yes.
And I think based on the manufacturing date, I think the Minister of Health was saying that there's 2 months left in that cycle.
Yes. Well, of course, there are 21 sites across Trinidad and Tobago. So I believe that they would be able to administer the requisite number of doses, because remember, there are priority groups, and starting with the healthcare workers, or rather continuing with the remaining healthcare workers, the frontline ones, in addition to those persons over 60 with underlying health conditions, and then older persons over 60. So I do believe we'll be able to use up those vaccines.
I asked because there is a 12 weeks window between the first and the second shot.
Yes, it's up to. So it doesn't have to be 12 weeks. There is, as you say, literally a window.
Yeah.
But that gives governments opportunities if there is a longer period of time. For example, if the shelf life was a bit longer in terms of when we got it, then they can spread it over a longer period of time. But it is a matter of the logistics to get it done within the window that we have by the end of May.
So it's up to 12 weeks. What's the lower threshold?
It's, I think it's 8 to 12 weeks. I stand to be corrected, but I believe it's around 8 to 12 weeks.
So you think that 8 weeks, if that would mean we'd have to get all of those vaccines out within at least 2 weeks to be able to meet that deadline before the expiration date of the vaccine.
Yes, and as I said, because there are 21 sites, and we have been working closely with the Ministry of Health doing simulation exercises to make sure that the process goes smoothly, that the nurses know what they need to do at each health center. We've rehearsed everything, including anyone who gets anaphylactic shock. What do you do? So I'm confident that the rollout will go well.
Well, I hope so as well, because it's for all of us. So
Absolutely.
Hopefully it happens.
Absolutely.
But, you know, are there any concerns by WHO and PAHO, again, over the AstraZeneca vaccine? I remember the last time we were here, we spoke about it. But now we're also seeing Canada deciding to pause on vaccinating anybody under the age of 55 because there seems to be some complications with the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Well, you know, during this period of time, because it's emergency use listing, I understand that governments are nervous. There is so much at stake in a pandemic. but there has not been any definitive proof so far that AstraZeneca has any serious adverse effects. We saw, for example, the story about blood clots, and there was found to be no legitimate link. So we are in a phase where we're a bit nervous about issues of safety, and some governments acting out of an abundance of caution, maybe pausing it. But we don't have any proof.
Yeah. But you know, for the people who have the blood clots, who didn't have them before taking that vaccine, it's probably not going to be as easy to convince them that there isn't some correlation.
There is always a medical follow-up. It's not an arbitrary thing when you have reports of adverse effects. So there is a clinical procedure that's gone through, because governments could also be liable, remember that, in case someone gets severely ill. But we haven't, and nobody has died, and so many millions of vaccines have been administered. But we also know that the human body, not every human is exactly the same, so there's always a risk, but we haven't found. But they've also said that, that they're continuing to investigate. So should there be, by chance, anything, it will be announced. But there's been nothing so far. Okay,
well, let's hope it stays that way, at least, for the safety and benefit of all. But, Dr. Wheeler, 1 year later, how well have we done?
Well, I think Trinidad and Tobago is in a very fortunate position. It is terrible that some people have died, but if we look around the world at the case fatality rate, as we call it, we are in a pretty good condition, actually, here. Of course, the closure of our borders has contributed significantly, especially because of the new variants. And the UK variant that is so much more transmissible. And of course, as people gather in groups more and more, what has happened is it gave the virus the opportunity then to mutate. It is because we've been gathering. So I think, having observed largely, of course, nowhere in the world has everybody completely observed all of the public health and social measures, but certainly having not had to do this before as a people, which of course is a struggle. We've done pretty well with the masking and the hand washing, and the physical distancing as we are doing now.
I tell people a solid 6 feet. When I see what's happening in my home country, Jamaica, I know for a fact that Trinidad and Tobago is doing well. When I look at other Caribbean islands who had kept their economy open and then have this uptick in cases while we were here complaining about being safe. I know that Trinidad and Tobago is doing well. But, one of the things that I think happened is that the press conferences, where you were a part of a lot of them, thank you so much, brought citizens the opportunity to ask questions, to get information in real time. How much do you think those press conferences contributed to our behavioral patterns and how we responded to the pandemic?
Well, I think they would have contributed, especially in the early days, because there was so much uncertainty about what should be done. But as the government continued to emphasize, the public health and social measures, as we saw what was happening, remember in the U.S. when there was that dramatic increase in cases, and of course Trinidadians, like everyone else, Trinbagonians, I should say, would be reading the news, looking on social media, seeing what's going on elsewhere, and hearing the same advice, about masking up and keeping your physical distance and so on. So I do believe that, in addition to the fact that there were many different experts, it wasn't only the minister or Dr. Hines or the CMO, many different people came on to explain the importance of the public health and social measures, to talk about mental health issues, a wide variety of issues. We had Professor Carrington and colleagues from UE to talk about the course of the disease and explain again and again what a virus is, how it acts, and so on. So I think that level of information is important, because even us in PAHO and WHO, we get weekly briefings from the Director General. You get up early in the morning, you're all goggly-eyed, but you want to listen to the latest news. Our director gives regular press conferences. So giving citizens the opportunity to know what's going on. It's also respectful, you know, educate, inform, and keep people knowledgeable about their own bodies, how they need to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah, and I think that was the first time since in the 11 years that I've been here that I've seen that kind of concerted effort to get information to people. And I think it kind of set up the government, so to speak, because now the desire to have information will not be satiated unless there is information going forward, you know. So I was definitely happy to see that. But, you know, one of the things that we've seen with the pandemic is the distrust, distrust of the vaccine, the distrust of the process, that it, you know, how long it took to get to a vaccine. But those press conferences gave us, as journalists, reporters, investigators, who even just the average man, the opportunity, as I said, to be a part of the process, to, you know, be in the know, so to speak. And when we look at the results, I would say it played a significant role in controlling, you know, what happened, because now the government was accounting to the people in a real-time, on a day-to-day basis. So was this one of those ideas that came out of PAHO? How did you all get to the point of saying, okay, this is what we need to do, because if we did this, these are the kind of results we're looking for?
Well, actually, I remember the time, oh gosh, way back last year, when we were in PAHO, was in one of the meetings with the minister, and he said, you know, I think we need to have these press conferences regularly. Do you agree, Dr. Wheeler? I said, yes, of course.
Yeah.
So I think it's something the government was aware of, that they need to communicate with people, despite the fact that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there, that it was important to bring the people closer to them, to understand the issues of importance, because you can't make assumptions. You know, there are a lot of scientific terms being used and thrown around, but to break it down into the language that the everyday person in the street could understand. And it's why I try not to use jargon as well, because it is very important, you know, to be respectful to your population. So yes, it was critical that the government did it, and it was the Minister of Health very early on recognized the importance of it.
Right, and of course PAHO and Dr. Wheeler were on board.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right, so what's next? I know that we spoke about the first tranche of vaccines. They are here. When can we get the second tranche? Because obviously a lot of it relies on you being the conduit between the WHO and the government through the Ministry of Health.
Well, the pledge is that from COVAX is that there will be a 4-week rolling delivery of vaccines. So the next tranche should be due in 4 weeks. And the idea behind COVAX for this first part of the year was to have the deliveries done all the way up to May, and then we know that in June, Johnson & Johnson vaccine would be available. We also know that Chinese vaccines are under consideration, and most likely late April they would be approved. So we expect from now on, by the middle of the year, there should be more vaccines available in general. If Pfizer also becomes available, we will be able to get Pfizer vaccines. So from now on, there will be a regular supply of vaccines from COVAX up to the 20% and beyond. The government asked for 33%, and that was also what PAHO would have worked out for the government, the cost of the vaccines. We've been negotiating with the vaccine manufacturers to keep the prices down as much as possible. So we hope to see that 4-week rolling delivery of vaccines up until May, and then more negotiation on after that.
And if those, the Sinopharm and the Pfizers are into the system, and the Johnson & Johnson, you know, does PAHO step in to recommend to the government which vaccines to distribute, or do they just choose based on affordability and availability? Yes,
so certainly for affordability, we are working assiduously to keep the prices down. We know AstraZeneca at $4 a dose was way lower than Moderna
or
and Pfizer, right? Although Moderna was not they didn't throw their hat into the ring as yet with WHO. But it is possible that in the second round, vaccines, the cost of vaccines may go up. It may not be $4, it might be $8 a dose. But for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, we have to wait and see what the negotiations say about the cost of these vaccines as they come out. We can't assume that they will stay the same, certainly, but we can assume there will be more vaccines available as the year goes on.
And hopefully with that, the prices will go down instead of up.
Yes, and we don't recommend vaccines as such, because what happens is, even in order to get the emergency use listing, the vaccines must meet the standards of quality, safety, and efficacy. And once that is done by WHO, we know that those vaccines, all vaccines that receive the emergency use listing, are eligible to be used by the population, with the proviso from what is known as the SAGE group, which is the group that reviews safety and gives recommendations, whether it be given to persons 18 or 16 years and over, because we know right now that's the situation with the current vaccines. Children are not included.
Yeah.
So this also may change as more clinical trials go on and children are included. So it's still a changing landscape for vaccines, and also vaccines are being tailored to suit the variants that are coming out. All these things take time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Wheeler, I want to thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of these press conferences and for helping us to get the knowledge that we needed to stay safe and to do pretty well in Trinidad and Tobago.
And thank you, Natalie, for inviting me.
You're most welcome. Dr. Erica Wheeler there speaking with us. A one-year anniversary since we started the first press conference looking at the COVID-19 pandemic and bringing you all the information that you needed to stay safe. So we continue. The vaccines are here, people. So, of course, the vaccination drive continues. We take a break and we'll be back with you.